Welcome, dear one, to CoADEP Econs Academy. I'm your facilitator, Adams Patrick Donko. I assure you that if you want to master the concept and develop a firm understanding, then you are at the right place. Please stay with me. Don't go away till the end of the lesson, and you're going to find it insightful and useful. Today, our topic is output approach to GDP. We want to understand how we calculate GDP using the output approach. Under this approach, we have two methods. Yes, I said two. The two methods are final product method and the value added method. To understand these two methods, I'm going to use a conceptual framework to drive home the meaning and how we can calculate GDP using each of the two methods. In the conceptual framework, we have a hypothetical economy where we have two production sectors, one being the agricultural sector and the other being the manufacturing sector. Apart from the two production sectors, we have households in this economy. Now, the agricultural sector produces $35 of gross output, and the manufacturing sector produces $60 of gross output. Out of the $35 in the agricultural sector, $20 goes to the manufacturing sector as intermediate goods. So when we talk about intermediate goods here, in the conceptual framework, it is going to be denoted with red color. And all that we mean by intermediate goods is that they are goods from one sector that are used in another firm or another sector as inputs. So output from the agricultural sector going into the manufacturing sector as inputs mean that these constitute intermediate goods. So out of this 35, 20 is going into the manufacturing sector as intermediate goods to further production there. The remaining 15 goes to households for consumption. So this 15 is termed as final good, and final goods are consumer goods. They are goods that are purchased by households for consumption. In the same way, the $60 gross output from the manufacturing sector, 10 of it goes into the agricultural sector as inputs. So the $10 of the output here constitute intermediate goods. The remaining $50 goes to households as final goods for consumption. So this is the conceptual framework. From this, we're going to look at how we can calculate GDP using the final product method first, and then the value added method second. So before we do that, let's understand what we mean by gross output. Gross output is the same as the total sales for every firm. So at the end of the day, when the agricultural sector, for instance, produces, they take their product to the market and sell. The value or the revenue from that sales is what we term as the gross output. So another word for gross output is sales. In some questions, they will give you gross output, others they will give you sales. So we come back to our final product method. All that the method requires us to do is that we take the final product from each sector, then we add them, and the resultant answer will be the GDP we are searching for. So in the agricultural sector, we have final product of 15, and then in the manufacturing sector, we have final product of 50. So when we add the two, our GDP is $65. So when we use the final product method, this is the answer we get. Our GDP is $65. Now let's move on to the value added method. So that's the second method. And when we talk about the value added, it is simply the difference between gross output or sales and intermediate goods. So when we pick our gross output or our sales, the value, and we subtract the value of intermediate good, the answer is our value added. So to use the value added method, you go to each sector, you use this formula to find the value added, and at the end of the day, you sum all the value added for all sectors to get your GDP. So let's start. In the agricultural sector, our gross output is 35, and then we saw that the intermediate goods into the agricultural sector was 10. So the value added in the agricultural sector will be 35 minus 10. We need to also do same for the manufacturing sector and add it. In the manufacturing sector, the gross output is 60, and we see that $20 go into the manufacturing sector as intermediate goods. So out of this 60, we subtract the 20 intermediate goods. So at the end of the day, we proceed. 35 minus 10 will give us 25, and 60 minus 20 will give us 40. So that means in the agricultural sector, we have value added of 25, and then in the manufacturing sector, we have value added of 40. When we add the two, we get GDP of $65. And this is the same answer we had when we use the final product method. Alright, so these are the two methods that we have under the output approach to GDP. What you should never do is to just pick the sales or the gross value and add them. For instance, you take 35, you add it to 60, what you get is 95. It's far higher than the 65. The reason being that when you just pick the gross output or the sales and you add them, you do double counting. You will double count the value of the intermediate goods. So for instance, 20 plus 10 here is 30. And when 30 is added to 65, we have 95. That means that if we should go straight ahead to add the gross output 35 to the gross output here 60, we'll get 95. And that will mean that we have double count the value of the intermediate goods. So never do that. Always try to use either the final product method or the value added method. And in which case, the nature of the question will tell you what to use. When you see that in each sector you have been given final product, then you just go ahead to add them. But when you see that you have been given sales from the sectors of production, or you have been given gross output, then you need to subtract the value of intermediate goods before you can arrive at the value added. Then you proceed to sum for each sector to get your GDP. Thank you for watching. I urge you to help promote the channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing.